Mavs Media Day and Training Camp begins on Monday. Check out our latest Mavs Step Back Podcast with Mavs.com's Bobby Karalla previewing the 2022-23 season.
Hey, I have a favor to ask. You might not know this, but this show that you're listening to is part of the Blue Wire Podcast Network. It's basically a network of awesome shows just like this one. My name is Andrew and I run network operations for Blue Wire. We just launched a survey and we need your help by going to bluewirepods.com/network survey to complete it. It only takes a few minutes and will help us understand who is actually listening to the shows across our network, which will help us sell better and more relevant ads on the shows you listen to. This helps support your favorite podcast hosts because it puts money back into their pockets for all the amazing content that they create. I've been a podcaster for over 8 years, and I can tell you that support from listeners is the number one reason why I continue podcasting. So go help your favorite podcaster out right now by going to bluewirepods.com/network survey to tell us some info about yourself. And if you do so, you'll be entered to win a $200 Amazon gift card. There's really no downside for doing this. That's bluewirepods.com/network survey. If you want to be entered for the chance to win the gift card, you can opt in when you complete the survey. Thank you very much.
Hi, this is Luka Doncic.
Can he get it away in time on the step back? He does! He hits! He hits! And the Mavericks have won the game! Luka Doncic with a 30-footer to win it at the horn!
And you're listening to the Mavs Step Back Podcast.
Everybody, welcome in to another episode of the Mavs Step Back Podcast. I'm your host, Dalton Trigg. You can find me at Twitter, at Dalton_Trigg, where I'm posting all of my DallasBasketball.com work, other silly Mavs content that, isn't really considered work, but, it's entertaining. So be sure to go find me there. Today we have a very special guest, return guest, from Mavs.com. It's Bobby Karalla. Bobby, what's up, man? How you doing?
I'm good, Dalton. I'm good. I can't believe that Bojan couldn't even fetch a first-round pick, so I can only imagine the trade machinations now taking place in your head, knowing that Utah doesn't even need a 1.
I was so upset when I saw that. I mean, and Bojan, earlier today, Bojan Bogdanovic going to the Detroit Pistons for Kelly Olynyk, and there was another piece. I forgot the other guy's name.
Saban Lee. How could you forget Saban Lee? Come on.
Saban Lee. No picks at all when, it's been reported for weeks, or the rumors have been that, Utah believed that they could get a first for like each of their top veterans on the roster. So I'm very upset about that, man. I've been a huge Bojan fan, since he was in the 2019 unrestricted free agency class. I really wanted the Mavs to pursue him then. They didn't really have the means of doing so at the time because he ended up making $20 million a year. But, man, I really wish they could have gotten in on that one somehow. But, where are you at with this current roster right now? Because I've been of the opinion that, if the Christian Wood trade had happened after what happened in free agency, there would probably be more of an overall optimistic view on things. But, the Christian Wood trade happened so early. It was 2 weeks before free agency. It was a week before the draft. So, people, I guess, it's more fresh that Jalen Brunson left versus, what the Mavs actually did. But, where are you on this current roster construction? How do you feel about the Mavs summer overall?
Yeah, I was like do you want to hear the good news first or the bad news first? And that kind of tells a lot about your personality, because there was some good and there was some bad. Obviously, Brunson leaving, especially for nothing, was such a gut punch. But, I think you add Wood, you add size, you add JaVale McGee. If you're of the opinion that rebounding and rim protection really, really matters and hurt the Mavs against the Warriors, then you're probably very happy with those upgrades. If you're of the opinion that you need as much playmaking as possible, then you're probably a little bummed. I don't think that the Mavs are satisfied with only Luka and Spencer Dinwiddie, and then to a lesser degree, I guess maybe like Ntilikina, Tim Hardaway, Jaden Hardy if he can really come along. I think they do want to upgrade or just straight up add a playmaker. but they seem pretty comfortable with leaving that 15th spot open. Now, that could be a gigantic smokescreen. Some dude just put his house on the market in LA. I'm sure plenty of people are going to try and make connections there. Like, I don't know if they're thinking like something like that big and that soon, or if they're content with just letting it ride until December 15th or the trade deadline, whenever a lot more guys can be moved. But I mean, I think if that's the route they're going to go, because I firmly believe, I'm a huge Mavs homer, obviously, wearing my Mavs polo. I'm at the Mavs office, Mavs employee, be forthright and everything. But I really, really staunchly believe that they need to add another playmaker, whether it's a point guard or some sort of ball handler, facilitator. If they wait that long, December, January, February, you're really starting to play with fire, because you got back-to-backs between now and then that Luka doesn't always play, that Spencer Dinwiddie can't always play because of his knees. Just general, what if one of them has a bad season? What if one of them gets really hurt? You're really tempting fate the longer you take this thing. And so I think the sooner they can add one of those guys, the better. But that might not be in their plans. So I guess we'll see. I mean, that's kind of like the missing piece to me. If you get one really, really reliable creator, facilitator, playmaker, whatever you want to call it, then I'm pretty satisfied. Until then, I'm going to be just like crossing my fingers, knocking on wood every time one of those guys drives the lane.
Earlier this summer, I spoke very briefly with Mark Cuban. I wanted to get his thoughts on, what happened in the heat of the offseason and kind of looking forward to this year. And he seemed pretty high on Frank Ntilikina, which I like Frank. I think he's a good player. But he just, even though he's a guard, he just hits me as more of like a small 3-and-D wing, rather than the type of player we believe the Mavs need to add at some point or another. But there's a chance that a guy like that could morph into what the Mavs need. Tyler Dorsey looked amazing for the Greek national team over the summer. But, his style of play, it kind of reminds me of like Tim Hardaway Jr. 2.0 more than a secondary distributor or something. So, I mean, I'm with you. I think they have to address that at some point. If they don't think they have to, maybe it won't show up as much in the regular season. I think Luka's so good, and the roster in general is good enough to where they can kind of have a similar success level as they did last year if there are no major injuries. But when it gets to the postseason, I think that's where it's really going to hurt. If they don't have that third guy, because that's what made the Mavs so dangerous in their Western Conference Finals run. You had Luka, Brunson, Dinwiddie, three-headed point guard monster, and it was hard for teams to combat that. So I don't know.
Even before that, like the last month or so of the season, as they were trying to really push for the 4 seed, they were grinding all these guys into the ground. I mean, Finney Smith and Reggie Bullock, they played a gazillion minutes in the playoffs, but they were also, Dorian especially was like regularly touching like 36, 38, 40 minutes. Same thing for Luka, same thing for Brunson. So like, I don't want that to have to be the case in November. Save that for like March and April. Like I don't want to have to see that all year. So that's why I think it's so important.
And and obviously, even if they don't add another point guard, a bench guard, if Josh Green develops and takes the next step, that'll take some pressure off of Dorian Finney-Smith and Reggie Bullock. And, he showed us some glimpses of what he could do in the playoffs. He had that really good, was it game 3 against Utah? Mm-hmm. When Luka was still out, he had a really solid game, 12 points, 6 rebounds, and a bunch of steals. I mean, he balled out in that one. So, I mean, if he takes the next step and kind of starts to reach that potential, what they thought he would be when he was drafted, that helps you a lot too. But one guy that I like, and we're going to go back to Utah because they're just, they've completely hit the reset button. They've traded away their big stars. They're slowly getting rid of their veterans on the roster. But Mike Conley is interesting to me because it just seems like he's not Jalen Brunson, but if you look at his stats from last year, like, it's close enough to where I think that would be a great addition off the bench. The only thing is, he's got the second year on his contract worth a little over $20 million. And, seeing what Bojan Bogdanovic went for, and he's an expiring contract, and they didn't get a first for him. It makes me wonder, like, could the Mavs potentially get Mike Conley without not only without having to give up draft compensation, but could they get some draft compensation since he has that second year on his deal? I mean, that's really interesting to me, and I think he'd be a perfect fit with the roster.
Yeah, I don't know. I think like the whole sort of like Utah's reasoning for wanting to deal Bojan is because they saved like $5 million this year, which like that's not really that much money, and also is not going to help them at all. So I don't really understand that. I think that a lot of those guys with longer term money, if it is the case that they just want to like fire sale, just like you can have all our players, they're probably not going to want long term money back. And I think the Mavs are just at the point now where they're like close to not having much or really any long-term money, but they're not quite there yet. That might be like a next summer type of thing, or trade deadline where it's a little more palatable, but I'm not sure. Obviously can't talk too much about that without getting clapped by Adam Silver, but the one thing like philosophically that I'm curious to see, whether it's this season or next summer or whatever, now that we're really fully into the J-Kid Nico era, is on this team right now, since Jalen left, the shortest guys like 6'4", 6'5", the shortest wingspans like 6'5", 6'6", so it feels like maybe they want to play giganto ball. And if they do, then, your 5'11", 6 foot, 6'1" point guards probably aren't going to be the targets, especially guys that are on the my side of 30. But I don't know. I mean, maybe they want, J-Kid had this sort of veteran savvy about him even whenever he was young, but especially later in his career. I know he values high IQ decision makers, creators and all that stuff. And so maybe they want a guy that's been around the block, or maybe they just want as many long athletes as possible. Like, I don't really know. I guess ideally you would have a guy that is very long and athletic on defense, but can also play this high IQ facilitating brand of basketball on offense, which there aren't many of them, but I don't know what they value. Do they value size? Do they value youth? Do they value athleticism? Do they value length? Or do they value IQ? Like, I don't really know their priorities. So it'll be really interesting to see kind of how that all shakes out.
Whatever happens, in the coming months and, leading up to the trade deadline, I really think it's going to be, you'll probably agree with me on this, but I feel like if the Mavs do make another move, it's going to be similar to the Christian Wood move. It's going to be something that's like really high value, has a really high upside, but they don't have to give up much, to get it. And that's basically because of their pick situation right now. And I had Chuck Cooperstein on either last week or the week before, I can't remember, but we talked about, the next time the Mavs make a big trade, and he seemed pretty dead set that it is going to happen sometime before Luka's current contract is up. But when it happens, when it happens, he basically said like it's going to blow what we thought was good with the KP trade at the time. It's going to like blow that out of the water, and I tend to agree with that. And it's really interesting if you look forward to next summer. And I know we have a full season to go through, and anything can happen. And I get yelled at on Twitter a lot because I'm always looking forward to the next offseason. But if you look ahead a little bit, that pick is going to convey to the Knicks next summer. They're going to have full flexibility with picks after next summer. And like you mentioned, depending on how a few things go, they could potentially have cap space too. So, and I know people groan when you mention Mavs and cap space in the same breath, but have they ever had, flexibility with cap space and picks together in the same summer? That's what I'm excited about. If that happens, then, say, and I know I'm not going to get you to comment on this stuff, but like say, given all the stuff that's going on with the Boston Celtics right now, and, it seemed like Jaylen Brown, he wasn't too happy with the Kevin Durant rumors over the summer, and he's going to be an expiring contract next season. I mean, you never know what can happen. The next big or the next star that becomes available past next summer, the Mavs will have the assets, in my opinion, to get in on something like that. So that's what I'm really excited about. But I mean, if I kind of nailed that part of it, I mean, if the Mavs do something between now and then, don't you think it's going to be more of like a bargain type deal?
Yeah, probably. I mean, they're not really in a position to be able to take on more money, and a lot of the larger contracts that they have right now have money on them beyond this season. Generally, that's not a really good recipe to make a deal, unless it's like last year they traded, KP, who had a lot of money left on his deal, for two guys who also had a lot of money left on their deal. So like you could maybe swap like a bishop for a knight or something, but you're not going to promote your pawn to a queen overnight. I think if you want to do that, probably going to have to wait till next summer. Although even then, like I'm curious, I don't pay too much attention to the super specific details of a lot of these big trades, but let's say the Mavs convey their 23 first. The next one they could trade is 25. Is that like desirable as a package? You could trade 25, 27, 29. I don't think you could trade 31 yet, but you can do like 4 swaps or whatever. Like you can give a lot of firsts, but if the first one that you're going to get is 2 years out, is that as good as if a team offers you the same number of picks, but their first one is this season? Like I'm just not really sure how that kind of all plays out, but they'll at least the least you can ask for is having a seat at the table. And once they have their picks back, they'll at least be able to have some conversations and be taken seriously, and that matters. I guess the next step would be, does player X all-star out there want to come here? Does he want to play with Luka? Does he want to be on this team? That's kind of like that's the thing that we won't really know about until it kind of happens.
Yeah, and I mean, the pick situation, or when teams are deciding on what picks they trade for, it's really inconsistent. A lot of it doesn't make sense to me sometimes, but I feel like the Mavs' immediate draft picks probably aren't as desirable. But
that's a good point.
You look at that the 2027 first round pick, and I think Luka's, if he declines his player option, he'd be a free agent in 2026.
He'll be firmly in his prime then, Dalton. Yeah. Mavs gonna win 65 that year. Don't you worry.
I'm just saying, if you're an opposing GM and you're looking at those picks, and it's a situation where they're gonna have to trade a guy regardless, maybe you take a chance and get a package that includes that pick, and you're just kind of hoping you hit the lottery there with obviously we hope that Luka never leaves and he signs another contract and everything, but that for an opposing GM that wanted to take a chance, that would be something that they'd probably look at. But like I said, it's so inconsistent.
It happens out of nowhere too. I mean, that's why like the ability to just offer a lot of picks matters, because we're all sitting around on our phone on June 29th or whatever thinking like who's gonna be the first free agent to sign, and then like the mother of all Woj bombs explodes. We find out like KD wants out, allegedly. Like you have to at least be able to offer something if you want to get in on those surprise situations. But we'll see.
Donovan Mitchell was 99% going to be a New York Knick until he wasn't, and then he was a Cleveland Cavalier all of a sudden.
Yeah, crazy things happen. If there's anything we learned over the last week, it's that you never know what's going to happen next in the NBA.
So with this new season coming up, training camp's about to start on Monday, and then we'll roll into preseason, and then next thing you know, it's going to be October 19th. Mavs tipping off against the Suns. The scene of the crime, Game 7 of that round 2 series last year. What is one of the biggest things that you're excited about? Or you can list a couple if you want to, but I mean, you're looking at this season overall right now with the moves that have been made this summer. Luka appears to be in like extremely good shape. I know the Eurobasket stuff didn't end the way he wanted it to. They got upset by Poland in the quarterfinals, but he looks like he's in great shape. The Mavs have some bigger dudes on the team now that are really talented. I mean, what's one of the biggest things, or a couple big things that you're excited about specifically?
When you're drafting your fantasy team, do you ever wish you could do the same thing with your business team? If you're building a roster to win the league, you need Indeed. Hate waiting? Indeed's U.S. data shows over 80% of Indeed employers find quality candidates whose resumes on Indeed match their job description the moment they sponsor a job. Something I love about Indeed is that it makes hiring super easy, like their instant match. Indeed does the hard work for you. Sponsor job, and boom. Instant Match shows you candidates whose resumes on Indeed fit your job description immediately after you post. With Instant Match, you can start hiring fast. Indeed knows that when you're doing everything for your company, you can't afford to overspend on hiring. Visit Indeed.com/Blue Wire to start hiring now. Just go to Indeed.com/Blue Wire. Indeed.com/Blue Wire. Terms and conditions apply. Cost per application pricing not available for everyone. Need to hire? You need Indeed.
I don't know if it's excited, but it's intrigued. Maybe that counts as being excited. Last season, Luka very famously got off to a poor start by his standards. And Reggie Bullock, really up until New Year's Day, was like, could barely get on the floor. I mean, he was shooting like in the 20s from three. So when two of your essentially who became your top 5 players start off out of form, you're going to be behind the 8 ball. And the Mavs certainly were. Now, of course, COVID had something to do with that, and there were a lot of other circumstances. But, last season, the first month or so was such a grind. And it was the same way the year before. And it was kind of even the same way the year before. First year of Luka KP, they get off to a good start, and then Luka misses like a month with ankle injuries, and all of a sudden they're like in 8th place, And so I'm really intrigued now that Luka is in super good shape, has just been playing basketball. Reggie Bullock finished the season so well. Can they get off to a better start? Because they're going to kind of have to, because at the same time as they're sort of trying to establish themselves in the standings, they're also going to be having to try and incorporate Christian Wood, whether it's off the bench or in the starting lineup. So, you're going to have to work out some of the kinks with that situation. You can't also have your best guys be struggling too. We saw how brutal this race to avoid the play-in is for each of the last 2 seasons. It's basically, for the Mavs, it's come down to the last couple weeks of the year. In fact, 2 years ago, it came down to the last game. You don't want to be in that situation, and the best way to avoid it is to get off to a good start. And so I'm really excited to see now that Reggie's totally comfortable, familiar. Luka is in tip-top shape. Christian Wood hopefully going to come in super motivated and all that stuff. They can kind of figure out the steps in training camp. Can they hit the ground running? If they do, I think it's going to be very smooth sailing this season. And if they don't, then it's going to be very difficult, because I'm sure you've looked at the schedule.
Yeah,
it gets very extremely hard, around Thanksgiving or a little before that. You cannot be licking your wounds through the easy part of your schedule. You have to rack up wins early on.
Yeah, and I mean, hopefully, the COVID stuff that really plagued the Mavs last year, hopefully that's in the rear view, and that won't have as big of an impact as it did last year. But the injury stuff is going to be the biggest thing, because Luka, it seems like, and sometimes it seems like it's just fluke deals with him. Somebody's foot lands under his awkwardly, and I think there was one game there, I think it was last season, where it was in the last 50 seconds of the game or something like that.
Tried to block a shot. Dude hasn't blocked a shot all year. What is he doing?
Last 50 seconds of a game, and then he misses 10 straight after that. So that was upsetting. But hopefully he can finally have, a really good, solid season of health. And I don't know that if he has cracked 70 games in a season yet. I think it was early on, maybe his first or second year. But I know he hasn't in the last 2 years, and part of that's because of the shortened season. But so I mean, I'm excited. I think this team is good. I caught some heat yesterday because I tweeted out that there were some people that it just seems like they're in a perpetual state of despair about the Mavs just because Jalen Brunson left. And I mean, I've acknowledged that's bad. I mean, it's bad. You lose your second best player from a team that went to the Western Conference Finals. There's no getting around that. It's just bad. But, all things considered, I don't think the Mavs could have done much aside from offering him a full max contract, to keep him in Dallas. And even then, that might not have even worked. I think it was Rick Brunson that said something about if the Mavs had offered that 4-year, $56 million extension before the trade deadline, that he probably would have accepted. I don't tend to believe that, because by that point Brunson was fully established as the team's second best player, and he helped navigate the Mavs through that tough period at the end of 2021. So I don't necessarily believe that. I think it was something that they weren't going to be able to avoid. But, all things considered, I mean, I think this team is still good enough to, like you said, kind of cruise through the regular season if they hit the ground running. So we'll see
you
how
have
it
to
goes.
get off to a good start. You have to get off to a good start and hope that, Maxi's post All-Star break doesn't happen again, or Reggie Bullock's pre-Christmas doesn't happen again. I mean, there's going to be hot and cold shooting stretches by nature. This is how things work. But these things lasted for 2 months. Tim Hardaway Jr., he gets hurt in January. His almost entire season last year, he did not have even one good week, 3-4 really good games in a row. Everybody was struggling the first month and a half or so, and that just cannot happen again. You have to get off to a better start. And it's kind of a bummer that they're going to have to sort of integrate a couple new guys. Tim is sort of new. Christian Wood is definitely new. JaVale McGee is definitely new. But you can't afford slip-ups as that's happening. So it's a little spicy.
A couple more things here for you, and then I'll let you get out of here, Bobby. But you mentioned Tim Hardaway Jr., and I did want to get your thoughts on this. The 2 seasons before last year, he shot nearly 40% from three. He was incredible. He was, when he got that, what was it, 4 year, $80 million, or no, $72 million contract. Everybody was just like, oh, well, that's well worth it given how he played. And then, last year, it just completely fell off. I think he was 33, 34% from three. Just didn't really seem to fit into Jason Kidd's scheme. Which, there were some bumps with everybody along the way at the beginning of last season. So I guess my question for you is, do you think that there is a way for Tim Hardaway Jr. to fit into this current roster with more time? Or do you think it's a situation where he just worked better under Rick Carlisle than he does under Jason Kidd?
I don't know. That's interesting. I think, his best performance obviously comes whenever Luka's on the floor. I haven't looked at their on-offs, but I'm just going to assume that Tim shoots really well when Luka's on the floor and shoots worse whenever Luka's off. Yeah. Most guys do. Last season, it kind of took him a while to figure out the rotation. Sort of is Tim starting? Is he coming off the bench? Is Luka going to play the whole first quarter? Is he going to play the first 5 minutes and come out? So I feel like once you get sort of into a rotation, the more minutes you can play Tim with Luka, I think the better. And what's probably going to happen is, Dinwiddie checks out 5-6 minutes into the game. Luka's playing your whole first quarter. In comes Tim. In comes Christian Wood. And then you can just spam pick and roll and get wide open threes for everybody. So hopefully it'll be a smoother fit. But, coming off the bench it is a little different. And, I would hope that Tim can sort of come in with that rhythm. But last year you could kind of see it at times, he's not starting a game. He's not getting served up open looks right away to sort of get a feel for it. He's having to come off the bench and assert himself right away. First time I touch the ball, I got to shoot it. And if you miss it, then you're all right, next time, all right, I'm going to make this next one. And so you're kind of pressing, you're chasing already. So hopefully just from the mental side, it all checks out. Hopefully he spends a lot of time with Luka, with Wood, more space. Everybody should be used to the new ball now. That shouldn't be something that is talked about anymore. So, I have higher hopes for Tim and for the offense in general. It was a clunk fest early in the season because it was Luka and KP were trying to figure out their personal deals, their duo deal, the new coaching deal. There was a whole lot of feeling each other out going on. And it felt like there were a lot of casualties as a result of that. But there shouldn't be that type of collateral damage this year incorporating Wood or McGee. It should just be much easier for everybody. It's just a matter of you got to be able to knock the shots down. The one thing, though, that Tim did really well last season is the on-off defense splits were really favorable toward him. They were really, really good defensively with him on the floor, best on the team at the time that he got hurt, which is surprising because I don't think of Tim as a defense first player.
Right.
But just the versatility, the athleticism and all that stuff, they just have good size, and that ties back to what they want to do. They just want as many long players as possible. Tim's 6'5", 6'8", 7 wingspan. He fits right in with that. So if you can contribute on defense and hit anywhere near 37, 38% from three, then you're golden.
And lineups are fluid, and I know, just because a certain starting lineup is out there doesn't mean that that's not going to change throughout the game, or that's going to be your closing lineup or anything like that. But that's one thing that really hit me hard when Jalen Brunson left, because I was thinking, okay, starting lineup's going to stay intact, and then Tim Hardaway Jr. struggled last year, but he didn't get to play with Spencer Dinwiddie off the bench, so I was really looking forward to that. And then Brunson leaves, now Dinwiddie's in the starting lineup, and we'll see how it goes. But
shooters need to be fed shots, man. So that's why you can never have enough playmaking, because the Mavs have a lot of shooting, but they don't have as many guys to get them the ball. So that's I think they got to upgrade there.
Last thing I got for you, it's not really basketball. Well, it's basketball shoes related. Luka has come out with all these different colorways. His new Luka Jordan 1s. Do you have any yet? Do you want any? What's kind of catching your eye with what Luka's dishing out there for us lately?
So I do not have a pair of those shoes yet. Jordan just tweeted a video about that, like mere moments ago. They put it out. So hopefully, like, more colorway options are going to be available in America, because I think right now that there's like a black and white one that's available, but not the full sort of palette. So hopefully they release more. I would like to get a pair, but dude, I wore these shoes last year until there were holes in the bottom of them. I've had the same pair. They used to be white Air Force Ones, and now they're just sort of like beige. I wear shoes until they break. I'm not a shoe guy, but I will go out of my way to acquire a pair of Luka ones. So I'm looking forward to more becoming available. What about you? Do you? I mean, I guess you would only have the black and white ones, right? Or do you have an overseas connect?
Well, see, I am the opposite of that. Well, I will wear out shoes. Like if it's everyday shoes, I wear those out until there's holes in them, like you said. But I am very much a basketball shoe guy, and I probably have too many. I went on StockX. I found a good deal in my size for those Matadors that I probably won't ever wear.
Just like the red and gold ones, right?
Yeah, because they're so loud. I probably won't ever wear those. That's probably just more of like a collector item thing. But I got those, and then I found on StockX. I found those red and dark navy, or it's dark navy, the Luka ones, and it has like a little hint of red on them too. I found those on there. They look like prime dad shoes, but that's my style.
We're entering that era, dude. Like we're that old now,
Yeah. I'm in my last like 5 or 6 months of my 20s, and then I'm fully going into my 30s. So
you're gonna wake up that day on your 30th, and like, I thought everyone was just messing with me, but it is true. As soon as you turn 30, things just start breaking, dude. Like it's gonna be rough. So I'm excited for you.
I feel like I have a head start on that already, but well, look, Bobby, I appreciate you joining me. You guys listening, y'all be sure to go follow. I mean, if you're listening to this podcast, there's like a 99% chance you're already following Bobby. But anyway, you can find him at Bobby Karalla on Twitter. Bobby, I appreciate you joining me as always. We'll have to do it again sometime, man.
Yeah, man. Thank you for having me.
Yes, sir. It's going to be a fun season. I'm ready for it. All right, guys, that's going to do it for another episode of the Mavs Step Back Podcast. Appreciate y'all coming in and listening every single week. And be sure to tune in for preseason content. Training camp starts on Monday. And then, like I was talking about with Bobby, preseason is going to be rolling around. And the next thing you know it, the regular season is going to be here. And we're going to be doing a lot of cool stuff this year. Obviously, the main podcast will have, post-game content for y'all either immediately after the game or the following morning. And then we partnered with Playback last year with our, with the Blue Wire Podcast Network. We're going to be doing that this year as well. And it's free. All you have to do is sign in with your TV login credentials, whoever you use as your provider, whether it's streaming or actual cable or whatever. It's free though. You log in, you get the Playback app. When I post the links, you just click on it, log in, and you can watch the games live with us, as we're all commenting on it together, and you can come on stage and talk about it and all that good stuff. So be sure to do that. Be sure to like, rate, and subscribe on all your favorite podcast platforms. Leave us a review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. If you do so, you'll automatically enter yourself for a chance to win t-shirt giveaways in the future, and potentially some tickets as well. We do those every now and then too. So appreciate it, guys. Y'all have a good rest of your day. Have a good weekend.